Hey guys, real quick, we just released Monster Classes 2. It is a PDF that I wrote that lets you play monsters as full D&D classes, and on this one we have the dragon, the ogre, and the lycanthrope. So yeah, you can finally play as a dragon. Please check it out. Go to the store, mrrex.shop, or click on this picture right here. It's sick. You will love it. Thank you. Brothers will fight and kill each other. Sisters' children will defile kinship. It is harsh in the world, whoredom rife, an axe age, a sword age. Shields are riven, a wind age, a wolf age. Before the world goes headlong, no man will have mercy on another. The golden rooster sings, the invincible god of beauty lays dead. The armies are marching and the beasts are coming. The end of the world is at hand. This is the twilight of the gods. Today we're going to cover the most important event that is to happen in the multiverse of Dungeons & Dragons. The end of the universe as we know it. What does it take for the gods to die? For the heavens to collapse? What is the necessary force needed in order to usher in an age of darkness or a rebirth of all that is known? Well, let's talk about it, but before we do that, this video is brought to you by Aurora Age of Desolation, a campaign setting made by the creators of Grim Hollow. The world of Aurora is set on a planet which experienced a massive cataclysm which shattered the land into 5 different realms. Each realm is governed and influenced by the mighty powerful Dragon Kings which rule over them. Each realm is vastly different and more dangerous than the last. First you have Galat, a lightning-charged realm that swallowed in sand dunes and desert dust storms. There's Kur, a gloom-covered realm of chill swamps, tangled marshes, and corroded wastes from awful acid rains. Here's Moxterma, a scorched wasteland of volcanoes that burst into fiery rivers of lava. Prezolar, with its icy pyramids, nexuses of great elemental magic, and blizzard-blasted tundras. And lastly, Tiefmere, a massive, dark, and gloomy forested world riddled with nightmares and abominations. The lands here are dangerous, and in this Dungeons & Dragons campaign setting, your characters will struggle for survival. The book brings with it tons of lore for these new regions, but also rules for players and dungeon masters to explore deadly environments. This means new 5e environmental survival rules, with mechanics meant to test characters in adventuring in such extreme wilderness. The book also brings with it new exploration rules, a system designed to bring the exploration pillar of play back into the forefront of your campaign. But that is not all either. They have created a new way for you to create player characters by replacing predetermined stats for races and instead designed this optional character creator with a feat-like system where you pick the racial abilities that your characters will start with, so that no person on Aurora will be the same as another. The book also brings an expanded way to incorporate the concept of rolling with advantage in your games. It is a robust system that allows players and GMs to elect for alternative benefits over the standard advantage roll, so that you can give your attack benefits rather than just opting to roll twice. Aurora Age of Desolation, the campaign setting, is currently on Kickstarter. The link is in the description below. Check it out and sign up for it. But now, back to the video. Today we're supposed to talk about Isgard, the last plane of good before we succumbed to the utter chaotic neutral energies of Limbo. And that is because you voted for Isgard on our last video. However, I am making an executive decision to instead focus on the end of the world because, as it so happens, the end of the world is actually centered around Isgard. And then on our next video we can delve deeper into the plane itself and talk about all the sort of things that you can find in there. Now, Isgard as a plane is fascinating because it is almost as if it requires or even demands domination. See, let me explain that. The Abyss is somewhat alive, and it makes slaves out of those that exist within it, granting power to the conquerors of its domains. This we call the Prince of Demons, and there are reasons to believe that this Prince of Demons might be acting on behalf of the Abyss itself, as an envoy of the Abyss, if you might call it that. In Mount Celestia, on the other hand, the mountains cooperate and work together with the angels and the gods that reside within it. None is more important than the other. The gods commune willingly with the helpful powers of the mountain. The Beastlands reject the settling of others, untamed and always in control. Bytopia doesn't do anything, it just exists. The planes and heavens of D&D functions as it is understood their alignment to be. Lawful good entities follow laws and cooperate with each other, and so does the mountain. The Beastlands represent the beasts that care only for themselves. The Abyss corrupts and destroys, molding and changing as it is needed, just how a chaotic evil monster would. Bitopia, well, those that go there seek peace and tranquility. Those that live there want nothing to do with the problems of the world. They just want to relax and be invisible in the grand scheme of things, and that's exactly what Bitopia as a realm does. If Bitopia had a spirit, it would seek to fade in the background and be forgotten. See, for all of these heavens, if you have noticed, they kind of have personalities to them. They behave as that which they are meant to reflect. Now, Isgard craves. It needs to be settled. It grants thrones to those who come to claim it. Isgard reminds me of the initial premise to Dragon Age Origin, where a civilization of powerful mages broke all taboos and casted forbidden magic in order to open a portal to heaven, only to realize that no one was actually sitting on the throne of heaven. It was empty, and as the mages entered this once perfect domain, they sullied it with their sin and ruined it, cursing not just heaven but the world as well. Now, the power of the Norse Pantheon, which of course are the divine collaborators that reside within the sacred halls of Isgard, come from the plane itself. The Norse Pantheon would be nothing without the plane. Well, they would still be gods, but not quite as powerful. Now, you do know the Norse Pantheon. Of course, we're talking about Odin and Thor, Loki, Heimdall, Freya, etc. They not only exist within the Dungeons & Dragons multiverse, but they're actually some of the most powerful and important gods in the lore. And again, that's because of the great powers granted to them by the realm. In fact, these gods don't even have to bother too much about petitioners in order to retain power. See, most gods require a lot of mortals to have faith in them in order to become more powerful. The more followers you have as a god, the more powerful a god you are. That doesn't really apply as much with the Norse Pantheon. Instead, these guys are born with divine power, and at birth, it is decided how powerful they will be and what kind of divine portfolio they will have. In essence, a belief in the Norse Pantheon is not on the gods themselves, but on the plane itself. Your faith is on Yggdrasil, the world tree, is on Isgard, the plane, is on Asgard, the realm. The bodies that sit on these thrones simply gain power from the belief in the realm, but are not what is important. Now, Isgard does have something of a personality, just how all of the other realms do. In this plane, there is one universal rule that all must follow, and that is, might makes right. In this plane, you take what you want, and if you cannot protect that which you own, then you do not deserve to own it. The only reason why this realm is barely considered good and not chaotic evil is because the right to own is respected by everyone when it is won. So if you have two barbarians who fight over the right of who will claim the magical great axe, the one who wins the contest gets the axe, and the loser will respect and honor it. This is actually the archetypal difference between us guardians and demons. Demons often do practice the might makes right mantra, but they will never respect an earned victory and will oftentimes attempt to undermine it whenever they can until they get what they want. The barbarians of Isgard appreciate power and gladly follow it, but they reject tricks and cheating. A demon will do whatever it takes to win, even backstabbing armless foes. In Isgard, on the other hand, war and battling is almost sacred. In this realm, a barbarian would give you a weapon to fight him with if you don't have one. And backstabbing is not considered really to be a true victory. Now, this mentality is really interesting, especially when it is held by a divine plane. In the Abyss, the most powerful one becomes the Prince of Demons, but at the end of the day, there is only so much that you can do with this title when you are constantly getting betrayed, backstabbed, or destroyed by your very own realm. The strongest will indeed be elevated, but will likely promptly fall under this pedestal made out of cards. On Isgard, if you are the strongest, then you will get elevated, but then you are supported by everyone behind you, by all those underneath you, and by the very essence of the plane itself. If you are the strongest, you will rule and you will succeed. This, in a much more different way, is also a really, really bad thing, or I should say, it can be a really bad thing. That is because anyone can sit on the throne of Isgard. The plane honors might makes right, and if the Norse Pantheon were to fall to another, Isgard would, theoretically, have no qualms granting its power to whoever sits on that throne. This, in essence, is the fuel that sparks the end of the world. The battle between the gods and the forces who would seek to usurp the throne of Isgard and usher a new age in the universe. This is Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. Right, but what exactly is this power that Isgard could grant, and why is it so important? I mean, we already have evil deities, some of which are extremely powerful, and the universe still keeps on going. Well, see, there are two big problems. The first one is that we wouldn't just be talking about one single powerful entity willing to do bad things, but also basically every single god or monster that is bred by this powerful entity would also be extremely powerful. Much of the power from the realm is divested onto the offspring of the rulers as well, and so you would have an entire pantheon filled with incredibly powerful entities that wouldn't necessarily be beholden to faith in the same way as those other gods are. But the second problem, which is the big one, are the connections which Isgard grants. Connections to the multiverse. Allow me to explain. Isgard appears to be the knot which ties the multiverse together in some ways. See, on this plane we have Yggdrasil, the world ash. Yggdrasil is an unimaginably enormous tree that exists mostly on the astral plane, but the roots rest on Niflheim, which is the second layer of Hades, and the top of the tree resides on Isgard. It is believed that this tree was in fact the one which directly gave the Norse powers most of their might, and that this tree is intrinsically connected to both Isgard and Niflheim. Yggdrasil functions almost like a plane in and out of itself, but its main thing is that it connects two many parts of the multiverse. Its branches are planar gateways to all of the other outer planes, and it is said that the tree stretches to every single planet in the prime material world that venerates the Norse gods. Further, the Norse gods have complete control over many aspects of the tree, including the souls of any who die in it. If Isgard had a spirit or a soul, much like the other outer planes like we've talked about before, that spirit would be found on Yggdrasil. Now, control over Yggdrasil is one thing, but there's more. In Isgard, you also have Bifrost, which if you know Norse mythology, or more likely if you have seen the Marvel movies, then you know exactly what it is. Bifrost is a conduit that at will can join Isgard with literally any planet within the prime material world. This connection shows as a rainbow bridge, in which those who venerate the Nordic Pantheon can then walk on. Only those who either accompany a believer or are a believer themselves can walk on it. The common name for Bifrost is, of course, the Trembling Road, because it constantly shimmers against other sources of natural light, and it looks like it's always moving. But there is one limit, however. Bifrost can only be activated on a single place in the Prime at any time, and the other end will always connect to the city of Himmingberg on Isgard. You can't ever have two connections active, but on the plus side, outside of using high-level magic or planar gates, it is virtually the fastest way to travel anywhere in the multiverse. It only takes 1 to 6 hours to get literally anywhere using Bifrost. To put it into perspective, it takes about a week to get anywhere in Yggdrasil. And that is if you know the way. Plus, some faraway locations will obviously take you longer. Like for example, if you would want to go from the top of the tree, which is Isgard, to the very bottom, which is Niflheim, the lore states that the trip would take you 100 days. And that's actually a very common thing, traversing through the ethereal realm, traversing through the astral plane. It tends to take a lot of time. 1 to 6 hours on Bifrost is a cakewalk. Anyways, the lore does state that Bifrost in particular was built specifically by the Norse Pantheon, and the prophecy does state that it breaks during Ragnarok, but one has to imagine that fixing it can't be that outside of the purview of whoever would take over Isgard in the future. Figured I would mention it anyhow. Anyways, the other big thing about Isgard is the Infinite Stairwell, which, yes, indeed, it is literally also within Isgard. It is, however, not manned or protected by the Norse Pantheon. Instead, it is protected by Selûne, the goddess of the moon, but it is indeed found on this plane, and its power is actually greater than what you might think. See, the Infinite Staircase connects, well, everything. I mean, it just doesn't have any restrictions, really. Yggdrasil connects to many places, but not all places, and those places where it does connect are fairly well protected and guarded. Bifrost can lead you anywhere within the Prime, but generally only to the Prime, and you can only link to one location at a time. The Infinite Stairwell is just, well, infinite, and its biggest draw is that it connects both space and time. In the Infinite Stairwell, you can indeed open a door into the past, present, and or future of a location, allowing you to do so much more than any other method of traveling. Generally, the stairwell is reserved for the gods as a personal walkway into any location within the realms, including their very own homes. But we're not really told too much about this stairwell other than that it is very confusing for mortals to use, since the stairs lead in all directions and many doors require key to open, and some of these keys are not just physical keys, but sometimes the keys are like riddles or actions that one must take in order to open doors. So like imagine like metaphysical keys, so to speak. And then there are many restrictions that can be lifted or opened if you know the secrets of the stairs, but of course not many people actually know those secrets. But now I hope that all of this helps illustrate just how the end of the world could even be reached in a multiverse filled with completely overpowered deities and powerful primordials. In the realm of Isgard, power can be taken by the victorious side, and whoever takes that power can use extraordinarily potent planar gateways to enact their power upon the universe. Remember that gods obtain their powers from the faithful, and the faithful ultimately live in the prime world, so having access to an infinite number of prime worlds makes whoever holds Isgard unimaginably powerful. There's also other things, like for example the river Oceanus, which passes by many of the upper planes, also touches certain parts of Isgard at very specific moments, which is yet another conduit of travel. If whoever held Isgard wanted it, it could allow entire armies from Hades to climb Yggdrasil onto the upper planes. Now, adding to that, of course, there are countless traditional portals that join Isgard with Arborea, since, of course, they are side to side on their metaphysical locations. So armies could invade Arborea from not just 2 or 3 fronts, but from a near infinite number of fronts. Reinforcements from the lawful side of the outer planes would come in slowly, since bypassing the Beastlands would be incredibly difficult with huge armies, forcing those armies to potentially sidetrack to the Outlands in order to get to Arborea or Isgard to join the battle. But those entrances, of course, are also extremely narrow, since we're looking mostly at a single set of portals on only 1 or 2 cities within the Outlands. It would be a mess, is basically what I'm trying to say. If Isgard was evil, a lot of damage could be done. Now, as you can see, it almost seems obvious that it is just a matter of time until something happens. And that alone is really cool, like from a story perspective, right? The possibility that a battle of the gods could happen in Isgard for control over great parts of the outer planes. But what makes it even cooler in a way is that we actually know how it will happen. And I mean that literally. What makes Ragnarok really cool is that it has been foretold how the battles would take place and who will be the one to attempt to usurp that throne. Now, before I go any further, I do want to state that I haven't studied the ancient poems of Norse mythology. For the purposes of this video, I am only interested in Ragnarok as it happens within D&D, specifically using Planescape, the set of books for the Manual of the Planes from 1st and 3rd edition, the Deities and Demigods 3rd edition books, and a couple of books from the Forgotten Realms like the Champions of Ruin. But yeah, anyways, the concept of Ragnarok does appear to go way beyond Planescape, and it even enters the generic D&D books that are meant to be setting agnostic, and we have mention of this end of the world scenario in a few books, even from the Forgotten Realms, so this is bound to get very, very interesting. But I did want to at least mention that some of this will inevitably differ from the real-life mythos of Ragnarok, so as you can imagine, so be ready for that. Okay, so the Norse Pantheon is not fully united as one might hope. They all follow Odin, as he is the leader and the most powerful, but there are many gods within the Pantheon, and they all have their own interest. In particular, the Pantheon is separated into 2, the Aesir and the Vanir. You know the Aesir as the gods of battle and war, and the Vanir as the more peaceful gods, some of which venerate nature. So for example, Odin and Thor are Aesir, while Frey and Freya are Vanir. These 2 pantheons had a big war a long time ago, but since then they have settled in peace. And now both groups live within Isgard, but in separated realms. Asgard, which is the main and most powerful realm within Isgard, is governed by the Aesir. Now, you also have the giants which live in Isgard. These are the fire giant god Surtur and the frost giant god Thrym. They have their own realms that are also separated from the rest. Now, both the Aesir and the Vanir have a Cold War situation going on with the giants. They basically kill each other whenever it is feasible for them to do so, but they're not in active warfare at the moment. Like, we're not seeing armies clashing yet. Now, let's talk about Loki. So Loki is a trickster god, but really more about creating fun strife rather than actual deadly mayhem, though this turns at some point. So Loki was actually instrumental at the very beginning of Asgardian history, whether we're talking about the early battles between the Aesir and the Vanir, or between all of them and the giants. Loki is also responsible not just for securing the construction of the giant divine wall of Asgard, but also helping Odin with dealing with a lot of political enemies from other pantheons. In fact, Loki has been so successful to the gang that he was named blood brother to Odin, which is a huge deal and carries with it a lot of respect. Now, over time, though, he has started to become more and more Machiavellian in his tricks, and over time, those tricks have started to become and turn into more and more evil. This is important because Loki is actually crucial in the events that will follow into the ends of the world. First of all, Loki is an extraordinarily powerful god. We're talking about a divine rank 16 deity. This is effectively stronger than 90% of all deities. Second of all, Loki has the special ability of being able to transform into anything at once, and this transformation, for all intents and purposes, appears to be genuine, as in it can fool even gods. Now, as far as his divine essence goes, it appears that he is not particularly stable, which makes sense considering that he is a chaotic deity. But even more so than that, Loki's seed is chaotically powerful and very random. So Loki is a father of monsters. When he bangs ladies, weird things come out. He actually once banged a horse, and from it came out a baby horse with 8 legs. This horse is of course the very famous Sleipnir, which ended up becoming the glorious steed of Odin. Now you have to remember, the Norse Pantheon is granted power by the plane and by Yggdrasil, and this power is given to their children as well, which includes Loki and his children, so anything that Loki produces becomes extremely powerful. Now, Loki has had a few romantic altercations with a giant named Argboa. A lot of these names are going to be Nordic, I can't pronounce them, but from this union came some of the most powerful monsters conceivable in the multiverse. 3, in fact. We have Fenrir the wolf, Jormungandr the world serpent, and Hel. These children were somewhat problematic at the time, and so they were each imprisoned or banished in their own way. Fenrir was imprisoned via godly made chains by being tricked, Jormungandr was banished into the prime material realm, and Hel was delegated into governing the souls of the dead in Niflheim, which is the second layer of Hades in the lower planes. Now, so outside of those guys, you also have a set of mysterious gods called the Nords. These are the caretaker gods of Yggdrasil, and they basically mend the tree from any damage that it might have, and they tend to its nutrition and magical well-being. They, in fact, are the gods of fate, and there's 3 of them. Using the frankly overpowered power of Yggdrasil, they can see into the past, present, and future of any living creature in the multiverse, including gods themselves. They actually are the ones that divined Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, but specifically they divined a set of events that will transpire during this Ragnarok, events that cannot be changed. And it is through this divination that we actually know exactly how some things will pan out. We don't know everything, to be fair, but we do know some very important stuff, and like I said, we know that it doesn't matter how much you try and change it, it will come to pass. That much at least the lore has told us. So, let's go ahead and talk about Ragnarok. The beginning of Ragnarok is foretold as the moment when Loki turns purely evil. We don't know why he does it from a holistic point of view, but we do know some of his motivations. Ragnarok begins when Loki kills Balder, the god of beauty and charisma in the Norse Pantheon. As a god, Balder is really cool because he is described as actually, literally being perfect. Unironically, just actual perfection. He is the most handsome out of all of the gods in existence, the most charismatic, so everyone wants to be around him, everyone loves him. Even evil gods are described as becoming suffer by just being around his presence. The only gods described as not being able to stand him are gods whose portfolios are opposite to what he represents. So gods of pestilence or rot, things like that. Now, because he was so good, some of the most powerful gods on the plains actually got together and basically made a pact to never hurt him, including performing some incredibly powerful magics in order to prevent most things from harming him. And so at the end, Balder was effectively turned invincible, or immortal. Nothing could hurt him. Odin himself couldn't lay a finger on him. However, the magic that protected him wasn't infallible, since it was designed to protect him from all the things that tended to kill people. Like spells or iron, silver, elemental attacks, anything that you would imagine could potentially kill a person. But anyways, Ragnarok begins when Baldur dies by getting pierced by a weapon made out of mistletoe. This happens because Loki tricks another god named Hod, which happens to be the blind twin brother of Baldur, into throwing the weapon right into Baldur's heart. And so, the invincible god dies. Somehow, Loki basically just realizes or discovers that the magical protections that protect Baldur from death are not granted by something as simple and as weak as mistletoe, and he takes advantage of this. Now, in revenge, Odin transforms one of Loki's insignificant children into a wolf, and then sicks that wolf against another of Loki's unimportant children. But then, the thing is, he uses the children's entrails to bind Loki in a cave, while a serpent slowly drips venom onto his skin. This is not meant to really be like a killing thing, this is meant to be a torture, as the venom is unimaginably painful. Now, we don't know much about what exactly transpires before this event or directly after, specifically whether or not Loki prepared for this moment, but we do know that at some point after, the armies of those who would seek to destroy the Aesir and the Vanir show up. These armies are composed of giants coming from Jotunheim, Hel, who marches her armies of petitioners towards Valhalla, presumably using Yggdrasil as a road. There's the wolf Fenrir, who breaks free from his chains, Jormungandr, the world serpent, which flies into Isgard, and then lastly, of course, Loki himself, who breaks free from his bindings right at the beginning. It is not written in the lore, but a lot of it feels very much premeditated by Loki, considering that he mysteriously breaks free the day of Ragnarok, and all of his children also break free from their binds as well, all at the same time, and his daughter, Hel, has an army just ready to charge, and the giants also attack at this exact moment as well. It feels like too many coincidences, basically. Now, it is also prudent to mention that the lore does indeed suggest that Loki has a giant blood on his veins, so his allegiance might not necessarily be fully with the Aesir or the Vanir. The lore also does state that clerics of Loki do a lot of work in the shadows with clerics of Thrym, so a lot of this leads one to believe that the likelihood is that he planned it all from the beginning. And that it's not so much that he turned evil as much as it is just him basically just purposefully and very obviously changing allegiances. But alas, it is said that the beginning of Ragnarok is when Loki tricks Hod into killing Baldur, but actual Ragnarok is the war, and the war starts when the armies march towards Asgard. Heimdall, who protects Bifrost and has his city close to the gates of Asgard, is meant to blow his magical horn when he sees the armies. The horn lets all of the gods of Asgard know that Ragnarok has now officially started. Now, a lot of interesting things have been divined from this battle. First, and I could be wrong on this, but it doesn't seem like Thrym and his frost giants actually joined the battle, or they could, but the divinations don't really mention them by name. In particular, they only mention Surtur. But alas, here are the divinations. We know that Fenrir devours Odin whole, effectively killing the most powerful god in the Pantheon. The Great Wolf does, however, die immediately after by one of Odin's many sons. Thor then defeats Jormungandr, but only takes 9 steps before succumbing to his wounds and dying. Loki will go straight into murdering his nemesis, which is Heimdall. See, Loki always hated Heimdall because Heimdall could see all that transpired within the realm, and so he would always ruin Loki's tricks by telling on him. So Loki goes and steals Heimdall's weapon and does a battle to the death with him. The divination says that Heimdall kills Loki, but then it says that Heimdall does die after. We don't actually know exactly how long after, but we do know that he dies because of his wounds in the encounter. That's all we really know. Now, the only other main divination that we have has to do with Frey. So, Frey is a god of peace and agriculture and fertility. He's actually a Vanir, not an Aesir, so he's not really meant to be for war. However, he does happen to be one of the most powerful gods in the Pantheon by sheer virtue of being so popular with petitioners. He's actually a divine rank 18 deity, which basically puts him just one tiny rank below Odin, and one tiny rank below any of the other mega gods that you know of, like Moradin, the god of dwarves. So he's really strong, basically. But he is fated to fight Surtur, the god of fire giants, and their army. Problem is, he is fated to fight him bare-handed because fate claims that at some point in the middle of the war, he will be forced to give his godly magical sword to his shield brother for an undisclosed reason. We don't know why. And so Searcher and Frey fight, and Searcher wins, killing Frey. And that's basically the last faded window into Ragnarok that we have. There's no true mention as to what happens with Hel and her armies or some of the more intricate details about the war. We do know that Searcher does effectively win, or at least insofar as he accomplishes his goal. We know that he manages to destroy Bifrost and, quote, burn the world, end quote. We know that Searcher is fated to burn the world, but divination can be a bit tricky. See, we don't really know exactly what the term world means in this context. Whether it means Isgard or Asgard or the prime material realm or the outer planes or all of reality, we don't actually know. But whatever world entails in this scenario, he basically burns it, and then Thrym will go to freeze it. And then the world is fated to restart in a new age. Oh wait, there's actually another prophecy too. So Tyr, the Tyr that you know from the Forgotten Realms, he's actually the same Tyr as the one from the Norse Pantheon. His arm was actually bitten off by Fenrir when they tried to imprison it as soon as they were foretold of the massive issue that Fenrir was going to be in the future. But anyways, Tyr is actually fated to die in battle against Garm, who is the hound that protects the entrance to Niflheim during Ragnarok. Garm is a four-eyed dog with blood that drips from his chest, and it is the loyal hound of Hel, the daughter of Loki. I can't recall for the life of me where I read this, and I can't find it again, and it's driving me crazy, but I recall reading on a D&D book that Tyr had a reason for going into the underworld during Ragnarok. He had brought an army with him, and he wanted to free the soul of Baldur, I think? I can't remember, but yeah, he and Garm basically fight to the death and both die. Now, after Ragnarok, the prophecy claims that only a few gods are destined to survive the Twilight. Hud the Blind, which basically gets banished when he kills Baldur, so he's not actually present during the war. Then there is two of Thor's sons. One is Modi and the other one is named Magni. It is in fact Magni who is the god who inherited Mjolnir, the weapon that Thor uses and one of the most powerful divine weapons in the multiverse. So even after Thor dies, there's still a god using this godly weapon, which is really cool. There is actually a weird typo in the Deities and Demigods book that makes some things a bit confusing. It claims that Vali is the son of Loki on one passage, but then another passage says that it is the son of Odin. So I guess this might lead one to believe that perhaps they are alluding to some kind of gay divine romance between Loki and Odin, but I think it is more likely just a typo, since in the actual real Norse mythology, Vali was the son of just Odin, who was birthed with the literal only purpose of having revenge on Loki for having killed Baldur. But anyways, Vali is meant to also survive Ragnarok. The only other god who is fated to survive is Vidal, who is another one of Odin's sons. He's actually the one who slays Fenrir after Fenrir devours Odin. But yeah, so the prophecy says that those are the only gods that survive Ragnarok. But again, it's tricky, right? We don't know exactly who they are referencing to when they say god that survives Ragnarok. They are probably only implying Aesir or Vanir god and not all gods, since we know, for example, that Surtur and Thrym survive, and they're also both gods. So, you gotta take these prophecies again with a grain of salt. They can be tricky with their definitions. So when they say that there are only a few gods that survive, we're probably meant to understand it as we're not really talking about all the gods that exist in all of the worlds. But there you have it, Ragnarok, right? Is that it? Does that mean that Surtur, the god of fire giants, just ends up being the winner in the Game of Thrones of D&D? Well, there's actually more to it. There's some debate as to what exactly does the word world mean within the context of Surtur burning the world, but there's actually a character who also takes a very direct hand in the events that unfold during Ragnarok. And if you are a nerd, then you might have probably been wondering this entire time, where is the serpent worm during these events? So, Nidhogg is the dragon serpent that is fated to eat Yggdrasil. And Nidhogg is actually the one who has the power to bring the events of Ragnarok into all the other planes, and into the prime material realm. He is, in fact, the one who actually destroys everything as you know it. but that's gonna have to wait until our next video. Originally I intended to include Nidhogg here, but this has already turned out to be a really long video, so we will have to save it for the next one, which should be coming really soon. I would like to personally thank my Patreon supporters: Barry Mascan, 5e Magic Shop, Morgan Johnson, Rusty Rain, Dog Feeder, The Great Codini, Omega Scales, Terry Kolb, Benjamin Bosters, Falky951, Ordoric, Sabim Kurshab, Thomas Hunt, Solus Rider, Lost Crusaders, Stalia, Stephen, Treb909, Trevor Hess, The Living Guild Pack, Describe, Herbert Johnson, The Wizard's Vault, James the Perverted, Shoddycast, Jesse Feliciano, Lucas Cyrek, Naktor Ashura, John Harley, John the Wicked, Shane and Sam Skinner, Sir Ignatius Thunderblade, Warren Smith, Baruch, Elisa Kestrel, Kristen Coleman, Lactose D Intolerant, Flameback 200, Merton Games, Falcon Scientist, Houndsong Games, Liberty or Death, Robert T, and Richard Sawyer for supporting me on Patreon at the $25 level. If you would like to support me as well, then please head on over to patreon.com/MrRex to support. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching, thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next time once we talk about Nidhogg, the Serpent Worm.